Well, good morning. Every once in a while, I get a random day off from work and I get to go and do a solo tour of a museum or a historical point of interest, something fun that I get to do by myself because Angela is not always into some of these adventures that I get to take. My tastes in location are either super historical, which could be a little boring for some people, or verge on the macabre. So today we are going through the latter of those two. It's not historical, it's a little macabre. So today we are at the National Museum of Funeral History. So it's going to be a little dark, but it should be really interesting. Should be a lot of fun to check out, and hope you'll stick with me on this one. All right, bye. In this nondescript building in the north side of Houston is the National Museum of Funeral History. And they also have a school here. The school is down this way. It's the American Funeral Service Training Center and the Commonwealth Institute of Funeral Services. And then they also have the museum, which is right here, attached to the school itself, and this is the entrance. So I am going to head in here and let's check it out. So $15 to get in, and in this nondescript building they have got a ton of stuff here. So I'm gonna go check this out and show you some of this awesome stuff that's in here. This is great. These are some of the hearses that have been used in the past, from a 1939 Superior to a Cadillac, Studebaker from 1935, and even some horse-drawn hearse carriages. These are really cool, really beautiful. This horse-drawn hearse is from 1832. This is believed to be the oldest restored hearse in the country. Right here. This white one looks a little small, and that's because it was a children's hearse. Look how small that casket is compared with my hand. Tiny. This is a glass casket, which is supposed to be see-through, but they do have a spacer in there that you can't see in. But it is completely made of glass so that you can see in and see the departed before they were buried. Back here in the back of this 1930s Lascelles is a wicker basket casket, and there's a little note here that says these originated during the Civil War, and soldiers that were amputated were carried around in baskets like this, and eventually as they died they were just buried in their baskets. If a lot of them lost their minds and got really depressed because they lost their arms and legs, and so that's where the term basket case came from. They became basket cases. In this section, they have a kind of a memorial tribute to famous people who have passed away, and some of the items that they had or are attributed to them, like Sally Ride's patch from the Challenger missions, Neil Armstrong's patch, Steve Jobs. But this was really interesting over here. Here's a replica of Marilyn Monroe's crypt that we all know is in LA. But they have a memorial replica of it here. And then some other exhibits over here. These are the original hiking boots worn by Robin Williams of that movie RV. Angela and I, don't judge us, we really enjoy that movie. It's a lot of fun. and we quote it all the time. So there is some really interesting, fun things in here. Here's another example of that glass coffin that I showed you earlier. But that one's a child size. Very interesting area. Memorializing people, those that have passed. This is the hat that Gene Wilder wore in Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. Some fun stuff in here. It's really neat. Here's some images of the daguerreotypes and how they would prop up people so that they could take the photos with the deceased, before they buried them. But this went back all the way to the 1700s when artists would paint the deceased. Before they were buried. So this is a funeral bus. Look how wide that is. And you could carry a couple drivers and attendants, 2 caskets, and then back here, there was a room here for pallbearers, and then another room back here for mourners. So you could fit like 20 people into this. And there's that door over there. This is really neat.
Here it is.
I don't know if you can tell from the lighting in here, but this 1916 Buick hearse is beautiful.
And it really wasn't.
Look at all the leather and the pinning on it,
So they decided that
and then the intricacy
it was a good idea.
carved in
Did it work? And so what they did was they ended up
to the walls,
jumping it, and it sat in
the curved doors back here,
in California for a long time. And then
the wood paneling.
the guys here in this museum, Mr. Waltrip, he bought that particular.
Beautiful. This Henny Packard hearse from 1938 is really cool. Looks like a PT Cruiser in the back. Or even a car where it would be open in the back for like rich people, but it's actually a hearse. So if you come back here and look, this bottom falls down and there's rollers where the hearse would slide in and it would be protected. This is really cool. It's a beautiful car. This is another beautiful hearse. 1921 Rock Falls hearse. Look how beautiful that is. All those wooden carved inlays. The rounded doors on the back. The wood roof. Even the wood tires. It's so beautiful. Man, that is gorgeous. All right, this is the crematory display. There's the oven. Here is our friend here who's going in. They are ready to be sent in and be baked there in that oven. We've got some more displays back in here. This is more of a more current version of a crematory and what crematory chambers looked like in the past.
Metals are separated and melted into ingots for reuse in the manufacturing process to make items.
And what happens to the remains
Cell phones.
afterwards. Yeah, apparently they use a magnet to get out any metal like these. This is a hip replacement and a back brace, things like that. And this is the average amount of cremated remains. And then they put them into a cylinder and eventually put them into an urn. These are some of the new ways that they're handling body care after cremation. The ashes can be compressed and made into a diamond, and which can be carried around with somebody as a memorial diamond is what they're calling them. Or they could be made into glass, into a colored glass. Or have an eco burial where they're turned into kind of a fertilizer and used to grow a new tree. They call these living urns. So now we're in the ancient Egyptian embalming section. We're gonna take a look inside this little room here. It's a little bit low overhead, but we're gonna take a peek inside and see what they've got going. Oh, there's our deceased right there. And they are gonna pull the organs out of them and put them in those jars. This is a display of Civil War embalming and how they started doing that on the battlefield. And then these are some of the more modern tools in the late 1800s, early 1900s of embalming.
This formaldehyde generator was used in small rooms and featured a formaldehyde solution.
So this is an example of how a home's parlor would be decorated for mourning during the 19th century. And some of the items that were used. So I am thoroughly impressed with this museum. I'm probably halfway through it, and it is amazing for this little brick building that's in the middle of nowhere. I'm really amazed at how good this museum is. It's more of the history of funeral sciences than it is trying to be morbid or kind of gross out people. It's about the history of death and funerals. It's awesome. This is great. So this is a section on the death of the Pope. And when the Pope dies, what happens? The Swiss guard that guards his body, and his body being on display for people to come through and observe. And you can see from this picture that they've got it pretty close. Amazing. Here we have another display of them taking the Pope's body and putting it into the papal coffin, which doesn't seem as elaborate as you would expect for the Pope. And here is a recreation of it over here. Kind of hard to see through the glass. And what the top looks like. This is an example, a recreation of Pope John Paul II's burial crypt and what it looks like. This is a hearse from a Japanese burial. Look at that. Looks like it's in the back of an El Camino. But it is beautiful. It looks like a little house. It's from 1972. Really neat. So these are artistic coffins. I've seen these before when I was in the Congo a couple years ago. on a school trip, I saw these on the side of the road and somebody mentioned, yeah, they're coffins. And apparently you get put into these, and I don't think you get buried in these. I think these stay out. They're really cool. So this section is on Mexico's Dia de la Muerte, Day of the Dead, and what a average family would look like when somebody died. How they would decorate, create a shrine to the loved ones that are deceased and the memories of those people. And then over here they have a little cemetery, a little family cemetery, and representing what it would look like in Mexico. This is a metal casket with a hinged lid and a glass viewing port so that you could see the deceased inside of it. And there's this whole room back here with more hearses, horse-drawn and motorized. Just tons of stuff. And that's right in front of the Mexico display. So you can tell by the bunting behind me that this is the patriotic portion of the funeral museum. This is the section where they talk about the president. So back here, this is the same model of casket that was used for JFK. And let me show you some other things. This is one of the original lighting elements used at President Kennedy's gravesite from 1967 to 1998. And an original granite stone, both donated by Arlington National Cemetery. So in this section, they've got some copies of things, but they do have some originals. For example, they have one of the original funeral scheduling books from Reagan's funeral. This is a similar weapon used by John Wilkes Booth to murder the President of the United States, Abraham Lincoln. This is a replica of the Lincoln death mask. And a replica of Lincoln's coffin. And kind of a diorama of the train that transported him on his funeral journey. This is the hearse that carried Ronald Reagan and Gerald Ford to their services in California. This is the actual hearse that they rode in before they were laid to rest. So I am thoroughly impressed. This was a really cool museum, really cool space. Spent a couple of hours here wandering around, reading all the placards, looking at all this stuff. There was some college school field trips going on at the same time, doing a scavenger hunt. So this was a blast, very informative, well worth coming out here and checking this out. It was great. Thanks for coming with me. Bye.